Sometimes life pushes you so far down that you're searching for scraps just to survive another day. In the heart of Appalachia, 12-year-old Maya Jenkins knows this feeling, walking through frozen woods with her dog Rex, hunting for firewood. When they stumble upon a crumbling cabin hidden in the forest, Maya expects nothing more than rotting wood. Instead, she discovers something that will change everything, a hidden treasure worth $5 million. As word spreads through their community, Maya learns finding a fortune is only the beginning of troubles. Greedy neighbors, dangerous strangers, and impossible choices now surround this young girl who wanted to help her family. What happens when a child must decide between keeping a life-changing secret and doing what's right? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's harsh buzz cut through the pre-dawn darkness. At 4:30, just as it had every morning for the past 3 years, Maya Jenkins rolled out of the narrow bed she shared with her 8-year-old brother Marcus, careful not to wake him. The floorboards creaked under her bare feet, a sound she'd learned to navigate around, stepping only on the spots that stayed silent. Their trailer sat at the end of Hollow Creek Road, where the pavement gave way to gravel, and the gravel eventually surrendered to mud. It wasn't much to look at, a single wide with a leaky roof and windows that never quite sealed against the mountain wind. But it was home, and Maya had learned early that home meant more than the building that housed you. In the kitchen, she could hear her mother, Patricia, moving around in the darkness, preparing for her first job of the day. Mama worked 3 jobs: cleaning offices downtown before sunrise, stocking shelves at the grocery store until mid-afternoon, then serving tables at Murphy's Diner until closing time. Maya knew the schedule by heart because she'd built her life around it. "Morning, baby girl," Patricia whispered when Maya appeared in the doorway. Her mother's face looked tired, even in the dim light from the single bulb hanging over the sink, but her smile was genuine. At 34, Patricia Jenkins carried herself with the quiet strength of someone who'd faced too many hardships to waste energy complaining about them. "Morning, Mama. You eat anything yet? Don't worry about me. You make sure Marcus gets his. Breakfast before school here? There's oatmeal in the cabinet." Maya nodded, though they both knew the oatmeal box contained maybe 2 servings. She'd been the family's breakfast strategist since she turned 10, learning to make meals stretch and knowing which days they could afford real milk versus powdered. Patricia grabbed her coat, a thin thing that had seen better years, and paused at the door. "Maya, honey, I need you to gather some firewood after school. The cold snap's supposed to last through the weekend, and we're almost out." "Yes, ma'am." Maya had been expecting this request. Their small electric heater worked, but only when they could afford to run it. Most of the time, the old wood-burning stove in the living room provided their heat. It wasn't efficient, but it was reliable, and Patricia had taught both children how to bank a fire safely. After her mother left, Maya settled into her morning routine. She woke Marcus gently, helped him dress in layers against the cold, and prepared their breakfast. 2 packets of oatmeal split 3 ways, 1 full bowl for Marcus, half a bowl for Maya, and the rest saved for an after-school snack. Rex appeared at the kitchen door as soon as Maya started moving around. The German Shepherd mix had shown up. At their trailer 2 years ago, half-starved and skittish, Maya had begged her mother to let them keep him, promising she'd take full responsibility. Patricia had agreed, maybe understanding that every child needed something that belonged just to them. Rex had proven his worth a dozen times over. He was fiercely protective of both children, walked Maya safely to and from the school bus stop, and seemed to understand the family's financial struggles. Maya had never seen him turn down any food offered to him, but he never begged or demanded attention when the humans were dealing with serious matters. "Morning, boy," Maya murmured, scratching behind his ears. Rex's tail wagged once, a controlled expression of joy that somehow conveyed both happiness and understanding of their circumstances. The school bus arrived at 7:15, rumbling up Hollow Creek Road with a diesel engine that announced its presence from half a mile away. Maya made sure Marcus had his backpack and lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, and an apple from the reduced-price school program before walking him to the stop. Their community was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, which could be both blessing and curse. Mrs. Patterson from up the road always made sure Maya and Marcus got on the bus safely. Mr. Coleman, who ran the small engine repair shop, had never charged Patricia full price for fixing their old car. But the same closeness meant that everyone knew about Patricia's struggles, about the bills that went unpaid some months, about the times when the Jenkins family relied on the church food bank. Maya didn't mind the gossip as much as the pity. She'd learned to hold her head high when Mrs. Garrison at the post office spoke a little too loudly about that poor Patricia Jenkins working herself to death. Maya understood that most people meant well, but she'd inherited her mother's pride. Along with her sense of responsibility, school provided structure and escape in equal measures. Maya excelled in her classes, partly because she was naturally bright, and partly because she understood education represented her best chance at a different kind of life. Her teachers consistently praised her maturity and work ethic, though Maya sometimes wondered if they realized how much of her maturity came from necessity rather than choice. The afternoon bus ride home was always quieter than the morning trip. Kids were tired, and Maya used the time to think through her evening responsibilities. Today's list included firewood, helping Marcus with his homework, preparing dinner, and trying to stay on top of her own schoolwork. Rex was waiting when the bus pulled away, tail wagging with the restrained enthusiasm Maya had come to love. He fell into step beside her as they walked up the gravel drive, and Maya found herself grateful for his steady presence. "Come on, boy. Mama wants us to find firewood before it gets dark." The woods behind their trailer stretched for miles, part of the vast Appalachian forest that had provided for families like theirs for generations. Maya had been exploring these woods since she could walk, first with her mother and later on her own, with Rex as guardian and companion. They followed familiar paths at first, collecting fallen branches and pieces of seasoned hardwood that would burn well. Maya had learned to identify the best firewood by sight and touch, dry oak and hickory that would provide steady heat, avoiding pine that burned too fast and poplar that produced more smoke than warmth. Rex ranged ahead, his nose leading him. Through scents, Maya could only imagine. He'd learned their firewood routine and often found good pieces before Maya spotted them. Today, though, he seemed distracted, pausing frequently to look deeper into the woods, toward areas they rarely explored. "What is it, boy?" Maya asked when Rex stopped completely, his ears perked forward and his body tense with attention. The path they'd been following curved west toward Miller's Creek, but Rex was looking north toward the steep terrain that rose toward the ridge. Maya had explored those areas before, but not recently. The climbing was harder, and the good firewood was usually found closer to home. Rex whined softly, an unusual sound that got Maya's attention immediately. In 2 years, she'd learned to trust his instincts completely. If Rex thought something was worth investigating, it usually was. "All right, show me." Rex led her up a steep deer trail, moving with purpose through brambles and around fallen logs. Maya followed, her arms already full of firewood, but curious enough to see where Rex was taking her. The climb was steeper than she'd expected, and after 20 minutes of hiking, she was breathing hard. Then Rex stopped abruptly and looked back at Maya, his tail wagging once. Maya pushed through a thick stand of mountain laurel and found herself in a small clearing she'd never seen before. The cabin sat at the far edge of the clearing, almost hidden by overgrown bushes and young trees. It was small, maybe 2 rooms, with a tin roof that had rusted through in places and walls that had weathered to grey. The porch sagged on one corner, and most of the windows had lost their glass long. Maya approached cautiously, with Rex staying close to her side. The building was clearly abandoned, but something about it felt different from other ruins they'd encountered in the woods. This place had been left deliberately, as if someone had simply walked away, intending to return. The front door hung partially open, revealing darkness beyond. Maya hesitated, remembering her mother's warnings about entering abandoned buildings, but Rex was already sniffing around the entrance, showing no signs of alarm. "What do you think, boy? Safe to look inside?" Rex's tail wagged once, his measured way of saying yes. Maya pushed the door open further, letting afternoon light spill into the interior. The cabin was larger inside than it looked from outside, with a main room that included a stone fireplace and what remained of a kitchen area. Everything was covered in dust and fallen leaves, but Maya could see that someone had lived here once, and recently enough that furniture and personal items remained. What caught her attention immediately was how neat everything still looked despite years of abandonment. Books sat on shelves, dishes remained in a cabinet with glass doors, and a rocking chair faced the fireplace as if someone had just stepped outside for a moment. Rex moved through the space confidently, investigating corners and sniffing at various items. Maya followed more cautiously, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. On a small table beside the rocking chair, she noticed something that made her stop completely. A photograph in a simple frame sat among what looked like mail and personal papers. Even through the dust, Maya could see it clearly. A man in military uniform, probably in his 70s, standing in front of this very cabin when it had looked new and well-maintained. Maya picked up the photograph carefully, brushing dust from the glass. The man had kind eyes and a gentle smile, and something about his expression reminded her of her grandfather, who died when she was 7. But what captured Maya's attention was the background of the photo. The cabin behind him was clearly the same building, but it looked completely different. The porch was sturdy, the windows intact, and the yard was carefully maintained. "Someone loved this place," Maya whispered to Rex, who had come to stand beside her. She turned the frame over and found a piece of paper tucked behind the photograph. In careful handwriting, someone had written, "James Mitchell, March 1998, home." At last, Maya felt something shift in her understanding of this place. This wasn't just an abandoned cabin. It had been someone's home, someone's refuge. James Mitchell had cared enough about this place to have his photograph taken here, proud enough to have it framed and displayed. Rex whined softly, a sound that meant he'd found something interesting. Maya looked up to see him pawing at what looked like a loose floorboard near the fireplace. She walked over and knelt down, running her hands along the edge of the board Rex had been investigating. It moved slightly under pressure. Maya's heart began beating faster. She'd read enough adventure stories to recognize the possibility of hidden storage, but she'd never imagined finding such a thing in real life. She worked carefully, not wanting to damage anything that might be important, until she managed to lift one end of the board. Underneath, she could see a small space, and something wrapped in oilcloth that had been carefully placed there. Maya sat back on her heels, staring at the hidden compartment. Whatever was down there, it had been hidden deliberately by James Mitchell, or someone else who had lived in this cabin. The responsible thing would be to leave it alone, to replace the board and walk away. But Rex was looking at her with expectant eyes, and Maya felt a curiosity stronger than her caution. James Mitchell had been real. She held his photograph in her hand. This had been his home, his refuge, and now Maya and Rex were the first people to find it since he'd left. She reached into the compartment and carefully lifted out the wrapped bundle. It was heavier than she'd expected and felt solid in her hands. The oilcloth had done its job. Whatever was inside had stayed dry despite years in the hidden space. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she unwrapped the bundle. Inside were items that made her breath catch, old gold coins, each one gleaming as if it had been minted yesterday, wrapped individually in soft cloth. There were at least 20 of them, maybe more. She held one up to the light coming through the broken window. Even to her inexperienced eyes, it looked valuable, heavy, detailed, and clearly very old. This wasn't play money or costume jewelry. These were real gold coins, hidden in a real secret compartment by a real person who had lived in this cabin. Maya's mind raced through possibilities. Were these coins valuable enough to matter? Could they be worth hundreds of dollars? Maybe even thousands? And if they were valuable, what was she supposed to do with them? Rex settled beside her, calm and patient, while Maya tried to process what she'd found. She rewrapped the coins carefully and looked around the cabin with new eyes. If James Mitchell had hidden gold coins under one floorboard, what else might be hidden in this place? But the afternoon light was already fading, and Maya knew she needed to get home before her mother returned from work. She tucked the wrapped coins inside her jacket, replaced the loose floorboard carefully, and made sure the cabin looked undisturbed. Walking home with Rex, Maya's mind churned with questions and possibilities. She had enough firewood for tonight, but more importantly, she had something that might change everything for her family. The weight of the coins against her chest felt both thrilling and terrifying. By the time they reached the trailer, Maya had made one decision. She would research these coins before telling anyone about them. She needed to understand what she'd found before deciding what to do next. Marcus was already home from his after-school program, working on homework at the kitchen table. Maya helped him with math problems while preparing a simple dinner, but part of her mind remained focused on the wrapped bundle now hidden in her dresser drawer. That night, after Marcus was asleep and their mother had returned from her evening shift, Maya lay in bed thinking about James Mitchell and his photograph and the careful way he'd hidden those coins. She thought about her mother's tired face and the empty oatmeal box and the heating bills they couldn't always pay. Rex curled up on the floor beside her bed, a warm and reassuring presence in the darkness. Maya reached down to scratch his ears, grateful for his companionship and his role in leading her to the cabin. "Good boy," she whispered. "We found something important today, didn't we?" Rex's tail thumped once against the floor, his quiet way of agreeing. Maya fell asleep thinking about possibilities and responsibilities, about James Mitchell's kind eyes in the photograph and the weight of gold coins hidden in her dresser drawer. Tomorrow, she would begin trying to understand what they'd found and what it might mean for their family's future. Maya woke before her alarm, the memory of hidden gold coins making sleep impossible. She'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, running her hands over the wrapped bundle she'd moved under her pillow. The coins felt real enough, heavy and solid, but part of her wondered if yesterday had been some kind of dream. It wasn't until she unwrapped one coin in the pre-dawn darkness that reality fully settled in. Even by the dim light of her phone, she could make out details that hadn't been visible in the cabin. An eagle with spread wings, stars around the edge, and a date that made her heart race, 1863. Maya had studied enough history to know that 1863 meant Civil War. If these coins were genuine, they weren't just valuable, they were historically significant. She rewrapped the coin quickly, her hands trembling with the implications. At breakfast, Maya found it nearly impossible to concentrate on normal conversation. Marcus chattered about a spelling test, while their mother grabbed a quick cup of coffee. Before heading to her first job, Maya nodded and responded appropriately, but her mind remained focused on the secret weight pressing against her ribs, where she'd hidden one coin in her jacket pocket. "You feeling all right, baby girl?" Patricia asked, pausing with her hand on the doorknob. "You look tired." "I'm fine, Mama. Just thinking about a school project." Patricia's expression softened with concern. "Don't push yourself too hard with your studies, you hear? I know you want to do well, but you're still a child." Maya managed to smile. "Yes, ma'am." After her mother left, Maya made a decision that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. She was going to skip school and return to the cabin. The responsible part of her mind protested. She'd never missed school without being genuinely sick, and her mother trusted her completely. But the coins in her pocket seemed to pulse with possibility, and Maya couldn't concentrate on anything else until she understood what she'd found. She walked Marcus to the bus stop as usual, then doubled back through the woods with Rex at her side. The dog seemed to sense her excitement and urgency, moving with purpose toward the hidden cabin. In daylight, the building looked even more abandoned than it had the previous afternoon. Vines had grown over parts of the walls, and the roof sagged ominously in several places. Maya approached more cautiously than before, taking time to examine the structure for safety hazards. Rex displayed behavior she'd never seen before. Instead of his usual confident exploration, he moved carefully around the cabin's perimeter, stopping frequently to sniff and test the air. His hackles weren't raised, but Maya could tell he was on high alert. "What is it, boy? You sense something different today?" Rex whined softly and pawed at the ground near the cabin's back corner. Maya walked over to investigate and noticed that the earth looked disturbed, as if something had been buried and later dug up. The hole was old, grass had grown over it, but it was clearly man-made. Maya's pulse quickened. If James Mitchell had hidden coins under the floorboards, what else might he have buried around the property? She entered the cabin with new eyes, looking for signs of other hiding places. The main room seemed exactly as she'd left it, but now Maya noticed details she'd missed before. The stone fireplace had loose mortar in several places. The kitchen cabinets sat slightly away from the walls. Even the floorboards seemed to have an irregular pattern, as if some had been replaced or reinforced. Maya started with the fireplace, running her hands along the stones and testing each one for movement. On the third stone from the left in the bottom row, she felt a slight shift. Working carefully, she managed to slide the stone partially out of position. Behind it was another small cavity, and inside that space was another oilcloth bundle, larger than the first one she'd found. Maya's hands shook as she unwrapped this new discovery. More gold coins, but these were different, larger and heavier than the Civil War pieces. The markings were harder to read, but she could make out what looked like a Confederate seal and dates from the 1860s. She counted 23 coins in the second bundle, each one gleaming with the weight of history and value. Maya rewrapped them carefully and sat back on her heels, trying to process what she was looking at. Rex had positioned himself by the cabin's front door, facing outward like a sentry. His posture suggested he was watching for approaching danger, which made Maya more aware of her vulnerability. She was alone in an abandoned building with what might be thousands of dollars in historic gold coins. The responsible thing would be to take the coins home, tell her mother everything, and let adults figure out what to do next. But Maya found herself thinking about her mother's exhausted face, about the empty oatmeal box, about the heating bills they couldn't always pay. What if these coins were valuable enough to solve their problems? What if this was their chance to break free from the cycle of financial struggle? Maya made another decision that surprised her. She would keep searching before telling anyone about her discovery. She needed to understand the full scope of what James Mitchell had left behind before involving other people in whatever this situation might become. She spent the next hour systematically examining every part of the cabin's interior. Rex remained by the door, alert but calm, which gave Maya confidence that they were safe for the moment. Behind a loose board in the kitchen wall, Maya found a third bundle, smaller than the others, but containing coins that looked different again. These appeared even older, with Spanish markings that she couldn't read, but that seemed to suggest they predated the Civil War entirely. By the time she'd finished her search, Maya had found 5 separate hiding places containing gold coins of different eras and origins. Some appeared to be American, others looked foreign, and all of them had the weight and appearance of genuine precious metal. Maya sat on the cabin floor, surrounded by carefully rewrapped bundles, trying to estimate their value. She had no expertise in coins or precious metals, but even conservative estimates suggested she was looking at tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. The magnitude of the discovery terrified and thrilled her simultaneously. This wasn't finding a $20 bill on the sidewalk. This was potentially life-changing wealth hidden by someone who had trusted that the right person would eventually find it. Maya thought about James Mitchell's photograph, about his kind eyes and gentle smile. Had he hidden these coins, knowing that someone like her might find them someday? Had he hoped they would help someone who truly needed help? Rex's sudden alertness interrupted her thoughts. His ears perked forward, and he moved closer to the door, his body tense with warning. Maya quickly gathered the coin bundles and hid them back in their original locations, working as quietly as possible. She could hear voices approaching through the woods, adult male voices discussing directions and locations. Maya's heart raced as she realized someone else was coming to the cabin. She finished hiding the last bundle just as Rex growled low in his throat, a sound that meant immediate danger. Maya moved to a broken window and peered through the trees. Two men in hunting clothes were walking up the deer trail, carrying what looked like metal detectors and shovels. They were heading directly toward the cabin. Maya's mind raced through options. She could try to leave through the back of the cabin, but the men were close enough that they might see her. She could hide inside the building, but that would trap her if they decided to explore the interior. Rex made the decision for her. He moved to Maya's side and nudged her toward the back door, his meaning clear. Time to leave, now. Maya followed Rex's lead, slipping out the back of the cabin just as the men's voices became clear enough to understand individual words. They were discussing treasure hunting and metal detecting, and one of them mentioned old Mitchell's place specifically. Maya and Rex moved carefully through the woods, staying low and quiet until they were well away from the cabin. Only when they reached familiar territory near their home did Maya allow herself to stop and think about what had just happened. Someone else knew about James Mitchell and his cabin. Someone else was looking for whatever he had hidden there. Maya realized that her discovery was more complicated and potentially more dangerous than she'd initially understood. That afternoon, Maya walked to the small public library in town, her mind buzzing with research questions. She needed to understand the value of what she'd found, but more importantly, she needed to understand the legal and practical implications of finding historical treasure on abandoned property. The librarian, Mrs. Foster, helped Maya access internet, resources about coin collecting and historical artifacts. Within an hour, Maya had enough information to confirm her suspicions. Genuine Civil War-era gold coins were extremely valuable, often worth hundreds or thousands of dollars each, depending on their condition and rarity. Maya's calculations made her dizzy. If even half of the coins she'd found were authentic and valuable, she was looking at more money than her family had ever dreamed of possessing. But the research also revealed complications. Historical artifacts often had complex ownership issues. Government agencies sometimes claimed jurisdiction over Civil War-era items, and valuable discoveries attracted attention from people who weren't always concerned with legal ownership. Walking home from the library, Maya felt the weight of knowledge settling on her shoulders like a heavy coat. She'd found something that could change her family's life forever, but she'd also stumbled into a situation that might be more dangerous than beneficial. Rex walked beside her, calm and steady, a reminder that she wasn't facing these decisions alone. Whatever happened next, Maya knew she would need to be careful, smart, and possibly braver than she'd ever had to be before. That night, lying in bed with the coin bundles hidden safely in her dresser, Maya made a final decision about her next step. Tomorrow, she would tell her mother everything. Whatever the risks or complications, she couldn't handle this situation alone anymore. But first, she needed one more visit to the cabin to retrieve all the coins before those treasure hunters returned. Maya fell asleep planning her final solo trip to James Mitchell's hidden refuge. unaware that her discovery was about to attract attention from people far more dangerous than amateur treasure hunters with metal detectors. Maya returned to the cabin the next morning with a backpack full of supplies, a flashlight, work gloves, a small shovel from their garden shed, and plastic bags to protect whatever she might find. She'd also brought a camera, her mother's old digital camera, to document everything before moving it. Rex seemed more relaxed than he had the day before, which Maya took as a good sign. His canine instincts had proven reliable in the past, and his calm demeanor suggested no immediate threats were nearby. The cabin looked undisturbed, but Maya noticed that someone had definitely been there recently. Bootprints in the muddy ground around the building were too fresh to be hers from yesterday. The treasure hunters she'd avoided had clearly spent time examining the property. Maya worked systematically this time, photographing each hiding spot. Before removing the coins, she wanted a complete record of where everything had been found, partly for her own understanding and partly because she suspected documentation might be important later. It was while photographing the loose floorboard, where she'd found the first coins, that Maya noticed something she'd missed before. The board didn't just lift up, it slid sideways slightly, revealing a larger cavity than she'd initially realized. Maya removed the board completely and shined her flashlight into the space below. What she saw made her gasp. Papers, wrapped in the same waterproof oilcloth that had protected the coins, and something that looked like a hand-drawn map. She lifted the papers out carefully, her heart racing with anticipation. The top document was clearly a map, drawn in black ink on heavy paper that had yellowed with age, but remained intact. Maya spread it out on the cabin floor and studied it by flashlight. The map showed the cabin and the surrounding area in remarkable detail. Every tree, rock formation, and water source was marked, along with what appeared to be a coordinate system. But what caught Maya's attention immediately were the symbols scattered across the map. Small X marks with numbers beside them, scattered throughout the property and beyond. Maya counted 15 marked locations, ranging from spots close to the cabin to areas that extended deep into the surrounding forest. Each X was accompanied by a number and sometimes a small notation in the same careful handwriting she'd seen on James Mitchell's photograph. One notation read, "Cache 3, books and papers, Oak Grove near Creek." Another said, "Cache 7, jewelry, collection, under flat rock, 50 paces north of fence line." A third noted, "Cache 12, emergency supplies, ammunition, dry goods." Maya sat back on her heels, staring at the map with a mixture of excitement and overwhelming anxiety. This wasn't just about gold coins anymore. James Mitchell had created an entire treasure network throughout this property, methodically hiding valuable items in locations he'd mapped with surveyor-level precision. Rex moved to Maya's side and nudged the map with his nose, as if understanding its significance. Maya scratched his ears absently while trying to process the implications of what she'd found. "What do you think, boy? Should we try to find Cache 3? Rex's tail wagged once, his measured way of expressing enthusiasm. Maya folded the map carefully and tucked it into her jacket pocket. She gathered the coins from all their hiding spots, sealed them in plastic bags, and placed them in her backpack. Then she and Rex set out to find the Oak Grove marked on the map. Following James Mitchell's directions turned out to be remarkably easy. His landmarks were precisely noted, and his pacing measurements were accurate. Within 20 minutes, Maya found herself standing in a grove of mature oak trees near a small creek. The flat rock mentioned in the cache notation was exactly where the map indicated it should be. Maya rolled it aside with effort, revealing a hole that had been lined with stones to prevent collapse. Inside was another oilcloth bundle, larger than any she'd found in the cabin. This cache contained treasures that took Maya's breath away, antique jewelry that even her inexperienced eyes recognized as valuable, a collection of rare books wrapped individually in protective cloth, and what appeared to be historical documents from the Civil War era. Maya photographed everything before rewrapping it, her hands shaking slightly with the magnitude of her discovery. Each new cache revealed not just additional wealth, but evidence of James Mitchell's careful planning and the depth of resources he'd accumulated. Rex proved invaluable in locating the marked spots. His keen senses led them directly to several caches that Maya might have missed despite the map's precision. By afternoon, they'd located 5 of the 15 marked sites, each containing items that added to the growing treasure collection. But Maya's excitement was tempered by increasing anxiety about the scope of what she'd discovered. This wasn't a simple find anymore. It was a complex situation, involving potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in historical artifacts and precious items. As they walked home through the woods, Maya noticed Rex becoming more alert and protective. His behavior suggested he sensed something that concerned him, though Maya couldn't identify any immediate threats. Her anxiety proved justified when they reached town. At Murphy's diner, where her mother worked evening shifts, Maya overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. 2 men in expensive outdoor gear were questioning Sally, the afternoon waitress, about the old Mitchell place and whether any locals had been seen exploring the area recently. They claimed to be historians researching Civil War sites, but something about their demeanor suggested more aggressive intentions. Maya ducked behind a parked car and listened as the men described exactly the location where she'd been finding James Mitchell's hidden treasures. They mentioned metal detectors, professional excavation equipment, and their intention to thoroughly investigate the property for historical artifacts. When Maya arrived home, her mother was waiting with an expression that meant serious conversation was coming. "Maya, honey, we need to talk. Mrs. Henderson called today, said she saw you walking through the woods with Rex instead of getting on the school bus this morning. You want to explain to me why you're skipping school?" Maya's heart sank. Mrs. Henderson lived in the small house closest to their trailer, and despite being nearly 80 years old, she had sharp eyes and a genuine concern for Maya's welfare. Maya had always liked the elderly woman, but right now, her watchful nature felt problematic. "I can explain, Mama, but it's complicated." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "Baby girl, whatever's going on, you know you can talk to me about it. Are you in some kind of trouble? Are kids at school giving you problems?" Maya looked at her mother's tired face and felt the weight of her secret pressing down like a physical burden. Part of her wanted to confess everything, the cabin, the coins, the map, the treasure hunters. But another part of her worried about involving her mother in something that might be dangerous. "Can I have a little more time to figure things out? I promise I'm not in trouble, and I promise I'll tell you everything soon. I just need to understand the situation better first." Patricia studied her daughter's face carefully. "Maya, you've never lied to me, and you've never given me reason not to trust you, but this secretive behavior isn't like you, and it has me worried." "I know, Mama, and I hate keeping secrets from you. Can you trust me for just a little bit longer?" Patricia nodded slowly. "All right. But Maya, if you're dealing with something dangerous or something too big for you to handle alone, you come to me immediately. Promise me." "I promise." That evening, after her mother left for her shift at the diner, Maya sat at the kitchen table, with James Mitchell's map spread in front of her. She'd marked the 5 caches she'd already found and was studying the locations of the remaining 10. Rex lay at her feet, calm but alert, as if understanding the importance of what Maya was planning. She'd made a decision. She would locate all 15 caches over the next few days, document everything thoroughly, and then tell her mother the complete truth about what she'd discovered. But Maya also knew she was working against time. The treasure hunters at the diner had seemed serious and well-equipped. If they began systematic exploration of the property, they would eventually find at least some of James Mitchell's carefully hidden caches. Maya folded the map and tucked it safely away, her mind already planning tomorrow's expedition. She had 10 more locations to investigate, and each one might contain treasures that could transform her family's circumstances forever. Outside, Rex suddenly raised his head and looked toward the woods, his ears pricked with attention. Maya followed his gaze, but saw nothing unusual in the darkness. Still, she made a mental note to be extra careful tomorrow. Something told her that she and Rex wouldn't be alone in the woods much longer. Maya's search of Cache 6 yielded something unexpected. A collection of baseball cards wrapped in protective sleeves and stored in a metal box that had kept them perfectly preserved. Even Maya, who knew little about sports collectibles, could tell these cards were old and potentially valuable. The cards featured players with unfamiliar names, but professional photography and printing that suggested quality. The dates she could make out ranged from the 1920s through the 1940s, and several bore the signatures of players whose names she recognized from history books. Unlike the gold coins, which felt too historically significant to research casually, the baseball cards seemed like something Maya might be able to investigate without raising suspicions. People collected baseball cards all the time, and antique shops often dealt with sports memorabilia. Maya decided to take 3 of the least impressive-looking cards to an antique shop in the next town over. She'd visit during her lunch break. From school, claiming she'd inherited them from a grandfather and wanted to know if they had any value. The plan seemed simple and safe. Maya had no way of knowing that vintage baseball cards were exactly the kind of easily traceable collectibles that drew immediate attention from specialists. Henderson's Antiques sat on the main street of Millerville, about 20 minutes by bus, from Maya's school. The shop looked respectable and established, with a painted sign that advertised estate sales, appraisals, collectibles. Maya entered nervously, carrying the 3 cards in a small folder. The shop owner, a thin man in his 60s with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, looked up from examining what appeared to be an old clock. "Help you with something, young lady?" "Yes, sir. I inherited some baseball cards from my grandfather, and I was wondering if you could tell me anything about their value." Maya pulled out the first card, a 1927 player she'd never heard of, and placed it carefully on the counter. The shop owner's demeanor changed immediately. His casual interest transformed into focused attention as he picked up the card and examined it closely. "Where did you say you got this?" His voice had taken on an intensity that made Maya uncomfortable. "From my grandfather's collection. He passed away recently." The man reached for a magnifying glass and studied the card more carefully. "This is a 1927 Honus Wagner card in remarkable condition. Do you have any documentation about your grandfather's collection? Provenance papers? Purchase receipts?" Maya felt her first flutter of real alarm. "I'm not sure what you mean by provenance papers. Authentication, dear. With cards this valuable, collectors need proof of legitimate ownership and acquisition. This particular card, if authentic, could be worth several $1,000s. Maya's heart began beating faster. Several $1,000s for one card, and she'd found dozens of them. But the shop owner's questions about documentation and ownership suggested complications she hadn't anticipated. "Do you have more cards from this collection?" the man asked, his eyes fixed intently on Maya's face. "A few," Maya admitted, immediately wishing she'd been less honest. "I'd be very interested in seeing the complete collection. Cards of this era and condition are extremely rare. In fact, I know collectors who would pay premium prices for authenticated pieces from this period." The man's enthusiasm felt predatory rather than helpful. Maya noticed he hadn't returned the card she'd shown him, and his questions seemed designed to extract information rather than provide assistance. "Could I have my card back, please?" Maya asked. "I think I need to do more research before making any decisions." The shop owner's expression shifted slightly. "Of course, but before you leave, could I get your contact information? I have clients who specialize in vintage baseball memorabilia, and I'd hate for you to miss out on top dollar for your grandfather's collection." Maya accepted the card back, but declined to provide her contact information, claiming she needed to discuss everything with her family first. The man's disappointment was obvious, and Maya felt his eyes following her as she left the shop. On the bus ride home, Maya realized she'd made a serious mistake. Her attempt at discreet research had instead announced to a stranger that she possessed valuable vintage collectibles. The shop owner's questions about provenance suggested that people in the antiques business paid attention to ownership histories and legal documentation. Maya's anxiety proved justified when she arrived home to find her mother waiting with a concerned expression. "Maya, Mrs. Henderson came by today. She said 2 men in an expensive car were asking questions about our family around town this morning. They wanted to know about you specifically, whether you'd been exploring in the woods, whether you'd found anything interesting recently." Maya's blood ran cold. What did people tell them? Mrs. Henderson didn't tell them anything, but she's worried. She thinks these men might be connected to whatever has you acting so secretive lately. Before Maya could respond, Rex began growling, a low, threatening sound that made both Maya and her mother turn toward the window. Through the glass, they could see a man walking up their gravel driveway. Maya recognized him immediately. The same thin man from Henderson's Antiques, now approaching her home less than 3 hours after their conversation. "Mama, I need you to stay inside," Maya said urgently. "That man was asking me questions about some old baseball cards today, and I think I told him too much." Patricia's expression hardened. "What kind of questions? Maya, what's going on?" Before Maya could explain, the man knocked on their front door. Rex's growling intensified, and the dog positioned himself between the door and Maya's family. "We don't have to answer," Patricia said quietly. "If he's making you uncomfortable, we'll just wait for him to leave." But the man's voice carried through the thin door. "Miss Jenkins, I know you're home. I just want to discuss your grandfather's baseball card collection. I think we got off on the wrong foot earlier." Maya felt trapped. The man clearly knew where she lived, which meant he'd tracked her down after their conversation. That level of pursuit suggested her cards were more valuable than she'd realized, and that she'd attracted exactly the kind of attention she'd been trying to avoid. Rex made the decision for them. The dog moved to the door and began barking. Not his usual alert bark, but the aggressive warning bark Maya had only heard when Rex perceived genuine threats. The man's voice became more insistent. "I have clients willing to pay top dollar for authenticated vintage cards. You're missing out on a significant opportunity." Patricia looked at Maya with growing alarm. "Baby girl, what kind of cards are we talking about?" Before Maya could answer, they heard a new voice outside. Mrs. Henderson's voice, firm and authoritative despite her advanced age. "You need to leave these people alone," Mrs. Henderson was saying. "This is private property, and you're not welcome here." The antique dealer's voice became defensive. "I'm just trying to conduct legitimate business with Miss Jenkins about some valuable collectibles." "These folks don't want to do business with you," Mrs. Henderson replied. "And if you don't leave their property immediately, I'm calling the sheriff." After several minutes of muffled conversation, Maya heard a car engine start and drive away. Mrs. Henderson knocked gently on the door. "Maya, honey, it's safe to come out now." Maya opened the door to find Mrs. Henderson standing on their porch, looking more serious than Maya had ever seen her. "We need to talk," the elderly woman said. "All of us. About what you found up at James Mitchell's old cabin." Maya's shock must have shown on her face, because Mrs. Henderson nodded grimly. "That's right, child. I know about the cabin, and I know about James, and I know about what he hid up there. And after today, I think it's time you learned the whole story before you get yourself into more trouble than you can handle." Patricia looked between Maya and Mrs. Henderson with growing confusion and concern. "Would someone please explain to me what's happening here?" Mrs. Henderson stepped into their small living room, Rex calming immediately in her presence. "Patricia, your daughter found something important, and now she's attracted the attention of some very dangerous people. We need to help her figure out how to handle this situation safely. Maya felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She was grateful that Mrs. Henderson knew about the cabin and could provide guidance, but she was also worried about how much more complicated her discovery was about to become. "Mrs. Henderson," Maya said quietly, "how much do you know about James Mitchell and what happened to him?" The elderly woman's expression grew sad. "I know everything, child. James Mitchell was my brother-in-law, and what happened to him broke my heart. He spent his last years hiding his treasures because he was afraid of exactly the kind of people who came to your door today." Maya sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the implications. "So you know about the gold coins? And the map? And all the caches? I know James was a careful man who made a lot of enemies during his government service, and I know he hid his accumulated wealth because he believed the wrong people would come looking for it eventually." Mrs. Henderson looked directly at Maya. "What I didn't know was that someone had finally found his treasures, and now that those people are sniffing around, we need to figure out how to protect you and your family from the kind of trouble that got James killed." Mrs. Henderson settled into Patricia's worn armchair with the careful movements of someone whose bones carried the weight of many years and difficult memories. Rex positioned himself at her feet, completely calm in her presence. A reaction that told Maya the elderly woman posed no threat. "James Mitchell was my late husband's brother," Mrs. Henderson began, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone who'd kept secrets for decades. "He lived in that cabin for nearly 15 years after he retired from government service. Most folks around here thought he was just another old veteran living quietly in the woods." Patricia leaned forward, her expression a mixture of confusion and growing concern. "What kind of government service?" Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth to reveal. "James worked for agencies that don't advertise their activities, Patricia. During World War II and for many years after, he did things for his country that required him to travel to dangerous places and handle sensitive situations." Maya felt a chill of understanding. "He was a spy." "More complicated than that, child. James worked in asset recovery and strategic acquisitions. When wars end and governments fall, valuable things get left behind or stolen. James's job was to locate those items and return them to their rightful owners, or to ensure they didn't fall into the wrong hands." Mrs. Henderson reached into her purse and withdrew a manila envelope, yellowed with age. "After James died, he left me some documents, with instructions to give them to whoever found his treasures. He believed the right person would eventually discover what he'd hidden." She handed the envelope to Maya, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside were military documents, official seals, and photographs that made Maya's discovery suddenly feel much more serious than she'd realized. The first document was James Mitchell's military service record, showing decades of classified assignments across Europe, Asia, and South America. The second was a letter of commendation signed by officials whose names Maya didn't recognize, but whose titles suggested high-level government positions. The third document made Maya's breath catch: an official inventory of recovered assets. That included gold coins, precious metals, artwork, and historical artifacts, many of which matched items Maya had found in the hidden caches. James spent 30 years recovering treasures that had been stolen by various regimes and criminal organizations, Mrs. Henderson explained. Sometimes he was able to return items to their original owners or rightful governments, but sometimes, especially near the end of wars or when governments collapsed, there was nobody left to return things to. Patricia studied the documents over Maya's shoulder. "So he kept them. His supervisors gave him permission to retain items that couldn't be repatriated, partly as compensation for the dangerous work he did, and partly because secure storage was better than letting valuable artifacts disappear into black markets." Maya looked up from the papers. "So everything I found legally belonged to him," Mrs. Henderson nodded. "According to these documents, yes. But Maya, there's more you need to understand. James didn't retire voluntarily. He was forced out of government service after he refused to participate in operations he considered morally questionable. He made some powerful enemies in the process. Before Mrs. Henderson could continue, Rex suddenly stood and moved toward the window, his body tense with alert attention. Maya followed his gaze and saw two men in dark suits walking up their driveway, moving with the purposeful stride of people accustomed to official authority. "Federal agents," Mrs. Henderson said. "Grimly, I was afraid this might happen once word got out about your discovery." Patricia stood quickly. "Maya, what exactly did you find, and how much trouble are we in?" Maya felt paralyzed by the scope of revelations crashing down around her. "Mama, I found gold coins and jewelry and historical artifacts worth maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I was trying to research their value quietly before telling you about them. The federal agents knocked on the door with authority that brooked no refusal." Patricia looked at Mrs. Henderson for guidance. "Answer it," the elderly woman advised, "but remember that you have rights, and Maya is a minor. They can ask questions, but you don't have to provide answers without legal representation." Patricia opened the door to find two agents displaying official credentials. The older agent, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair, introduced herself as Agent Sarah Coleman from the Treasury Department's Office of Asset Forfeiture. "Mrs. Jenkins, we're investigating reports of recovered historical artifacts that may be connected to ongoing federal investigations. We understand your daughter may have found items of interest in this area." Maya stepped forward, her mother's hand protectively on her shoulder. "What kinds of items?" Agent Coleman's expression remained professional but not unfriendly. "Gold coins, jewelry, and documents related to World War II-era asset recovery operations. We're not here to confiscate anything, but we do need to verify the legal status of any items that have been discovered." Mrs. Henderson spoke up from her position in the armchair. "Agents, I believe I can save everyone some time. I have documentation regarding the items in question." She gestured to the papers Maya still held. Agent Coleman examined the documents, and carefully, her expression shifting as she read through James Mitchell's service records and asset inventories. "These appear to be authentic," she admitted, "but we'll need to verify their legitimacy with our records department. In the meantime, we'd like to document anything that's been found and ensure proper chain of custody." Maya felt a moment of panic. If the agents took the treasures for documentation, would she and her family ever see them again? Patricia seemed to read her daughter's thoughts. "Agents, we want to cooperate fully, but we also want to make sure our rights are protected. Should we have a lawyer present for this discussion?" Agent Coleman's partner, a younger man who'd remained silent, finally spoke. "Mrs. Jenkins, we're not here to take anyone's property illegally, but these kinds of discoveries often attract unwanted attention from people who aren't as concerned with legal niceties as we are." As if summoned by her words, Rex began barking at something outside. Through the window, Maya could see more vehicles arriving, not government cars this time, but expensive SUVs with tinted windows. Mrs. Henderson stood slowly, her expression grim. "Maya, child, I think your secret is officially out. By tomorrow, everyone in 3 counties is going to know you found James Mitchell's treasures." Agent Coleman looked concerned. "Mrs. Jenkins, for your family's safety, I think we need to discuss protective custody while we sort out the legal aspects of this situation." Maya felt her world spinning out of control. 24 hours ago, her biggest worry had been finding enough firewood to heat their trailer. Now, federal agents were discussing protective custody while mysterious SUVs gathered outside her home. Patricia pulled Maya close, her protective instincts fully activated. "Nobody is taking my daughter anywhere until I understand exactly what's happening and what our options are." Mrs. Henderson moved to the window and peered through the curtains. "Patricia, those vehicles outside aren't government issue. I think we have bigger problems than just legal documentation." Maya looked at the treasure inventory in her hands, at the federal agents in her living room, at the suspicious vehicles outside, and finally at her mother's frightened but determined face. "Mama," she said quietly, "I think I made a really big mistake when I decided to keep this secret from you." Patricia's expression softened despite the chaos surrounding them. "Baby girl, the only mistake was trying to handle something this big by yourself. Whatever happens next, we're going to face it together." Agent Coleman checked her phone and frowned. "Mrs. Jenkins, I just received word that there are multiple parties claiming interest in the recovered artifacts. This situation is about to become much more complicated than a simple ownership verification." Rex's barking intensified, and Maya realized that her discovery had set in motion forces far beyond anything she could have anticipated. James Mitchell's carefully hidden treasures had attracted exactly the kind of dangerous attention he'd spent his final years trying to avoid. The adventure that had begun with a curious 12-year-old girl and her dog searching for firewood was rapidly becoming something that threatened to overwhelm everyone Maya cared about. 3 days after the federal agent's first visit, Maya made a discovery that changed everything again. While searching Cache 11 with Rex, she found something James Mitchell had hidden more carefully than anything else. A painting wrapped in multiple layers of protective cloth and sealed inside a waterproof container. Even in the dim forest light, Maya could tell the painting was extraordinary. The colors were rich and vibrant, the brushwork masterful, and the subject, a young woman in elegant dress from what looked like the Renaissance period, seemed to gaze directly at Maya with knowing eyes. A small card tucked behind the painting's frame contained information that made Maya's heart sink. "Madonna with Child," attributed to Francesco Di Giorgio, stolen from Palazzo Rossi, Florence, Italy, 1943, recovered Budapest, 1947. No surviving claimants identified. Maya photographed the card and the painting before carefully rewrapping everything. She was beginning to understand that each new discovery brought exponentially more complications. This wasn't just a valuable painting, it was stolen art with international implications. Her suspicions proved accurate when she researched the painting at the library that afternoon. Francesco Di Giorgio was a significant Renaissance master, and his works were worth millions. More troubling, Maya found recent news articles about Italian authorities working with international law enforcement to recover art stolen during World War II. The painting she'd found was specifically mentioned in a 2018 article about ongoing recovery efforts. The Italian government was actively seeking its return, and several criminal organizations had been linked to trafficking in stolen Renaissance art. Maya felt sick to her stomach. She'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than civil war. Gold coins or vintage baseball cards. International art theft involved serious criminals and government agencies from multiple countries. When she arrived home, Maya found chaos waiting for her. Her mother sat at the kitchen table across from 3 new officials: Agent Coleman from the Treasury Department, a man introduced as Detective Morrison from Interpol, and a woman whose credentials identified her as representing the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage. Patricia's face was pale with stress. "Maya, these people are asking about paintings and artwork. They say there are reports that you might have found items stolen from European museums." Maya looked at the assembled officials and made a decision that felt both brave and terrifying. "I did find a painting, but I haven't moved it or damaged it. It's still where James Mitchell hid it." Detective Morrison leaned forward with sharp interest. "Can you describe this painting, Miss Jenkins?" Maya provided a careful description while Agent Coleman took notes. The Italian official, Dottoressa Rossi, became visibly excited as Maya spoke. "Madonna with Child by Francesco Di Giorgio," Dottoressa Rossi said in accented English. "This painting disappeared from Palazzo Rossi in 1943 when Nazi forces looted Florence. My government has been searching for it for 80 years. Maya felt trapped by the implications. Does this mean I'm in trouble for finding it? Not at all, Detective Morrison assured her. But this discovery has attracted international attention from parties who aren't as concerned with legal processes as we are. As if to emphasize his point, Rex began growling and moved toward the front window. Through the glass, Maya could see several expensive cars parked along their road and men in dark clothing positioned where they could watch the house. Agent Coleman followed Maya's gaze and frowned. Mrs. Jenkins, I think your family needs to consider temporary relocation while we sort through the legal aspects of this situation. Patricia's voice carried strain. Agent Coleman, I can't just leave my jobs and take my children into hiding. We have responsibilities here. Mama, Maya said quietly, you might not have jobs to worry about anymore. Patricia looked at her daughter with confusion until Agent Coleman explained. Mrs. Jenkins, word about the art discovery has spread through the community. Some people are supportive, but others are concerned about the attention your family is drawing to the area. Your employers may feel pressured to distance themselves from the controversy. Maya's worst fears were confirmed the next morning when Patricia returned from her cleaning job in tears. The building manager had terminated her employment, claiming that security concerns made her presence problematic. They said people have been calling the offices, asking questions about me and wanting to know if I have access to valuable items. Patricia explained to Maya. My supervisor was apologetic, but she said she couldn't risk the liability. Mrs. Henderson appeared at their door an hour later with urgent news. Maya, child, you and Rex need to come stay with me for a few days. There are strangers asking aggressive questions around town, and some of them don't look like government officials. Maya packed quickly while her mother made arrangements to stay with Patricia's sister in the next county. The plan was temporary separation until the legal situation stabilized, but Maya felt like her family was being torn apart by forces beyond their control. Mrs. Henderson's small house felt like a fortress compared to their exposed trailer. The elderly woman had drawn all her curtains and positioned chairs where she could watch the street without being seen. Maya, I need to tell you something about James that I didn't mention before, Mrs. Henderson said, as they settled in her living room. The people he worked for during his government service weren't always the good guys. Near the end of his career, James discovered that some of his supervisors were selling recovered artifacts to private collectors instead of returning them to their rightful owners. Maya felt a chill of understanding. Is that why he was forced out of government service? James tried to expose the corruption, but his supervisors had too much political protection. Instead of investigating his claims, they discredited him and terminated his security clearance. James spent his last years afraid that the people he'd crossed would eventually come looking for the evidence he'd gathered. Rex suddenly stood and moved toward Mrs. Henderson's back door, his hackles raised. Maya could hear voices outside. Men, speaking in low, urgent tones about searching the property. Mrs. Henderson moved to a window and peered through a gap in the curtains. Maya, we need to leave now. Those aren't police officers outside. Maya grabbed her backpack while Mrs. Henderson gathered some papers from a hidden safe. They slipped out the front door while the intruders were focused on the back of the property, with Rex leading them through yards and side streets toward the woods. Where are we going? Maya whispered as they moved through the darkness. To the one place those people won't think to look, Mrs. Henderson replied. James's cabin. Sometimes the most dangerous place is also the safest. As they walked through the woods, Maya reflected on how completely her life had changed since finding that first cache of gold coins. What had begun as a hopeful discovery that might help her family had become a nightmare that was destroying everything she cared about. Her mother had lost a job and was in hiding. Maya herself was running through the woods like a fugitive. Federal agents, international law enforcement, and dangerous criminals were all interested in her discovery. The treasure that was supposed to save her family was instead tearing it apart. Rex pressed close to Maya's side as they climbed toward the hidden cabin. offering the kind of steady comfort that only animals seem capable of providing. Maya scratched his ears gratefully, thinking that her dog might be the only good thing to come out of this entire situation. Behind them, flashlight beams swept through the trees as their pursuers realized their quarry had escaped. Maya quickened her pace, wondering if James Mitchell's carefully hidden refuge would provide sanctuary or simply become another trap in a situation that seemed to grow more dangerous with each passing hour. The cabin felt different at night, filled with shadows and memories of James Mitchell's presence. Maya and Mrs. Henderson had been hiding there for 2 days, venturing out only when Rex's keen senses confirmed they were alone. The federal agents had established a protective perimeter around the area, but dangerous treasure hunters still managed to probe the boundaries. Maya spent hours studying James's map and inventory documents by flashlight, trying to understand the full scope of what she'd discovered. More importantly, she was trying to understand James Mitchell himself, why he'd hidden these treasures, how he'd anticipated someone would find them, and what he'd intended for that person to do with them. Mrs. Henderson had been unusually quiet since their arrival at the cabin, moving restlessly through the small rooms, as if searching for something she couldn't quite identify. Rex watched her with curious attention, occasionally whining softly as if he sensed her internal struggle. On their 3rd night in the cabin, Mrs. Henderson finally stopped pacing and looked directly at Maya. "Child, there's something I haven't told you about James in this place. Something I wasn't sure you were ready to hear." Maya lowered the documents she'd been reading. "What kind of something?" Mrs. Henderson moved to the stone fireplace and began running her hands along the rocks, testing each one methodically. "James was more paranoid about security than I let on. He didn't just hide treasures in caches around the property. He also created a final safeguard, something he told me about but made me promise never to reveal unless the situation became truly desperate." Maya watched as Mrs. Henderson found what she was looking for, a stone that shifted when pressed in a specific sequence. Behind it was a steel handle that, when pulled, opened a hidden compartment larger than any Maya had discovered before. Inside the compartment was a fireproof safe, small but clearly built to survive disasters. Mrs. Henderson stared at it for a long moment before speaking again. "James made me memorize the combination to this safe, but he made me promise to let whoever found his treasures open it themselves if they proved worthy of what was inside." Maya felt her heart racing. "What's in there?" "The truth about everything, child. James's real will, legal documents that explain your rights, and instructions for what he hoped would happen if someone like you found his hidden treasures." Mrs. Henderson recited the combination slowly while Maya worked the dial with trembling hands. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing documents that immediately changed Maya's understanding of her entire situation. The first document was unmistakably a legal will, properly notarized and dated just 6 months before James Mitchell's death. Maya read the key passage aloud. "I leave all my worldly possessions, including but not limited to the items catalogued in the attached inventory, to the person who finds these treasures through genuine need and demonstrates pure intent in their discovery." Maya looked up at Mrs. Henderson with shock. "He planned for someone to find his treasures? He wanted someone to find them?" "Keep reading, child." The will continued with specific language that made Maya's breath catch. "Should the finder be a minor, this bequest is contingent upon demonstration of moral character and wise judgment in handling the discovery. The finder must prove themselves worthy not through greed, but through their response to the ethical challenges this inheritance will present." Maya found her voice. "Mrs. Henderson, this says he left everything to me specifically because I found it the way I did." James believed that treasures should go to people who need them, not people who simply want them. He designed this whole situation as a test, Maya. Every challenge you've faced, every decision you've made, has been part of determining whether you deserve what he left behind. The safe contained additional documents that revealed the full scope of James's planning. He'd anticipated government interest, international claims, and dangerous treasure hunters. More impressively, he'd prepared legal strategies to address each potential complication. Among the papers was a letter addressed simply to the finder, written in James's careful handwriting. If you are reading this, you have demonstrated the curiosity, persistence, and courage I hope to find in my eventual heir. The treasures you have discovered are legally yours, but ownership comes with responsibilities I hope you are prepared to accept. I spent 30 years recovering items stolen from their rightful owners, but I also accumulated wealth through legitimate means during my government service. Everything I have hidden is legally mine to bequeath, according to the documentation provided. However, legal ownership and moral ownership are not the same thing. Some of the items you have found should be returned to their countries of origin, or to surviving family members of their original owners. Others can legitimately be kept or sold to provide for your needs. The true test of your worthiness is not whether you can claim these treasures, but whether you will use them wisely and with consideration for others who may have stronger moral claims to specific items. I have provided contact information for an attorney who specializes in cases like this. He has been retained and paid to represent whoever finds my treasures, regardless of their financial circumstances. Use his services wisely. Maya set the letter down with shaking hands. Mrs. Henderson, did you know what was in James's will? The elderly woman nodded slowly. I knew the general terms, but I didn't know the specific wording. James made me promise to let events unfold naturally, to let whoever found his treasures prove themselves through their own choices. Maya felt a mixture of relief and overwhelming responsibility. So everything I found legally belongs to me. According to James's will and the supporting documentation, yes. But Maya, legal ownership is just the beginning of your challenges. Now you have to decide what to do with that ownership. Rex moved to Maya's side and rested his head on her knee, offering comfort during this moment of revelation. Maya scratched his ears while trying to process the implications of what she'd learned. Mrs. Henderson, there's something else I need to know. Earlier, you said James was your brother-in-law, but some things you've said suggest your connection was deeper than... And that Mrs. Henderson's expression grew sad. James was my younger brother, Maya. I lied about the brother-in-law relationship because I was afraid people would think I was coaching you or trying to manipulate the situation for family gain. Maya felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. So you've been watching out for me, not just as a neighbor, but because James asked you to. James made me promise to watch for whoever found his treasures and to help them if they seemed worthy. He believed the right person would eventually discover what he'd hidden, but he also knew they would need guidance to handle the situation safely. The safe contained one final document that made Maya's situation even more complex, a detailed legal analysis of government claims to various items in James's collection. The analysis concluded that while several agencies might attempt to assert ownership rights, James's legal claim to most items was solid, based on proper acquisition and documentation during his government service. Maya studied the legal paperwork, while Mrs. Henderson prepared a simple meal on the cabin's wood stove. The attorney James had retained Benjamin Crawford of Richmond, Virginia, specialized in treasure law and international art recovery. His retainer letter indicated he'd been expecting contact from James's heir and was prepared to begin immediate legal action to protect their interests. Mrs. Henderson, Maya said eventually, I need to call my mother and tell her everything. She deserves to know the truth about what's happening and what our options are. Mrs. Henderson agreed, and they used her cell phone to arrange a meeting at a safe location. Patricia arrived 2 hours later with Marcus, both of them looking worried and exhausted. Maya spent an hour explaining everything. the extent of the treasures, James's will, the legal documentation, and the international complications. Patricia listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to concern to something that looked like pride. "Maya, baby girl," Patricia said finally, "you've been handling an impossible situation with more wisdom than most adults. Would show, but this decision is too big for you to make alone. This affects our whole family." Marcus, who had listened with wide-eyed attention, finally spoke up. "Maya, does this mean we're rich now?" Maya looked at her 8-year-old brother and realized that James Mitchell's test wasn't finished. How she handled this moment, how she explained wealth and responsibility to her family, would determine whether she truly deserved James's trust. "Marcus, it means we have opportunities we didn't have before, but it also means we have responsibilities we need to think about carefully. Some of the things I found should probably be given back to people who lost them a long time ago. Other things might help our family, but we need to be smart about how we use them." Patricia's expression showed her approval of Maya's measured response. "So what's our next step?" Maya looked around at her family, at Mrs. Henderson, who had become like a grandmother to her, and at Rex, who had been her constant companion throughout this adventure. "I think we call the lawyer James left for us and start figuring out how to do this right. Not just legally right, but morally right. James designed this as a test of character, and I don't want to disappoint him." Mrs. Henderson smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Maya had seen from her since this whole situation began. "Child, I think James would be very proud of the person who found his treasures." Maya felt the weight of decision and responsibility settling on her shoulders, but for the first time since finding those first gold coins, it felt manageable. She had legal grounds for ownership, family support, professional legal help, and most importantly, a clear sense of what James Mitchell had hoped she would do with his legacy. The real adventure was just beginning. Maya discovered James's most personal message tucked behind his will, in an envelope marked, "For the finder, read this last." The letter was longer than his legal documents, written in the careful handwriting of someone who understood the weight of the words they were leaving behind. "My dear heir," the letter began, "if you are reading this, you have found my treasures and proven yourself worthy of inheriting them. More importantly, you have demonstrated the character I hope to find in whoever discovered what I spent my life accumulating. I am writing this letter during my final months, knowing that cancer will end my life soon and that my treasures will outlive me. I could have donated everything to museums or sold it all to establish a foundation. Instead, I chose to hide it and wait for someone who would find it through genuine need rather than greed. You see, I learned during my years of government service that wealth reveals character rather than creating it. I watched good people become corrupted by sudden riches, and I saw poor people maintain their integrity despite desperate circumstances. I wanted my life's accumulation to go to someone whose character had already been tested by hardship. These treasures you have found come from 30 years of legitimate work, recovering stolen items and compensating for the dangerous assignments I accepted. Every coin, every piece of jewelry, every artifact was acquired legally and documented properly. But legal ownership and moral responsibility are different things. Some items should be returned to their countries of origin. The Italian painting, for instance, belongs in Italy regardless of how I acquired it. Other pieces, like the Civil War coins, are legitimately yours to keep or sell as you see fit. The challenge is learning to distinguish between what you can claim and what you should claim. If you are young, as I suspect you might be, remember that wisdom often comes from understanding when to say no to opportunities that seem beneficial but carry hidden costs. Wealth can be a tool for good or a burden that destroys families. The choice is always yours. I have provided legal resources to help you navigate the complexities of claiming your inheritance. Use them wisely. But remember that lawyers can tell you what you can do legally. Only your conscience can tell you what you should do morally. Be brave, be wise, and be worthy of the trust I have placed in you. With hope for your future, James Mitchell, Maya. Read the letter 3 times before setting it down, feeling the full weight of James's expectations settling on her shoulders. This wasn't just about finding treasure anymore. It was about proving herself worthy of a dying man's faith in human. Oh goodness, Patricia had been watching her daughter read, and something in Maya's expression made her reach over and take the letter for herself. After reading it, she looked at Maya with an expression that mixed pride and concern. Baby girl, this man put a tremendous responsibility on you. Are you sure you're ready for everything that comes with claiming this inheritance? Before Maya. Good answer. Her phone rang. Attorney Benjamin Crawford was calling from Richmond, responding to the message Mrs. Henderson had left at his office. Miss Jenkins. Crawford's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to complex legal battles. I've been expecting your call for several months. James Mitchell retained my services specifically to help whoever found his treasures navigate the legal challenges they would face. Maya put the phone on speaker so her family could hear. Mr. Crawford, how complicated is this going to get? Very complicated, Crawford replied, without sugarcoating the situation. I've already received inquiries from the Treasury Department, Interpol, the Italian government, and 3 different private parties claiming various interests in items you've discovered. We're going to need to move quickly to establish your legal standing before these claims become formal challenges. Maya felt her stomach tighten. What does that mean practically? It means we're going to court, Miss Jenkins. There will be a hearing to determine the validity of James's will and your ownership rights to the treasures. Multiple parties will contest your claim, and you'll need to be prepared to defend not just your legal right to inherit, but your moral fitness to handle the responsibility. Patricia leaned toward the phone. Mr. Crawford, this is Maya's mother. How much danger is my daughter in from people who might not want to resolve this legally? Crawford's pause before answering was telling. Mrs. Jenkins, I won't lie to you. Valuable treasure discoveries attract dangerous attention. I've already hired a security consulting firm to assess the threats your family is facing. My recommendation is that you accept protection until the legal situation is resolved. Maya looked at Rex, who had been unusually alert for the past several days. Even now, the dog was positioned where he could see both entrances to Mrs. Henderson's cabin, his body tense with protective attention. Mr. Crawford, Maya said, if we go to court and I win, what happens then? Then you become the legal owner of assets worth several $1 million, with all the responsibilities and challenges that entails. Maya, I need you to understand that winning this case will change your life forever. There's no going back to the way things were before you found James's treasures. After ending the call, Maya's family spent hours discussing their options. They could walk away from the entire situation, allowing the government and international claimants to sort out ownership among themselves. Maya would lose any claim to the treasures, but their family would return to their normal, quiet life. Alternatively, they could fight for Maya's inheritance rights, accepting the legal costs, public attention, and potential dangers that came with claiming millions of dollars in found treasure. Marcus, despite being only 8, offered unexpected wisdom. Maya, if that man James wanted someone like you to find his treasure, maybe he knew you would do good things with it. Maybe walking away would disappoint him. Mrs. Henderson nodded her agreement. Child, James spent his final years specifically planning for this situation. He believed strongly that his treasures should go to someone who needed them and would use them wisely. If you walk away now, his careful planning becomes meaningless. Patricia was more cautious. I'm worried about the danger this is bringing to our family. Maya, baby girl, no amount of money is worth putting you or Marcus at risk. Maya spent that night thinking about James's letter, about his test of character, and about what her decision would say about the person she was becoming. Rex stayed close to her side, seeming to sense the importance of her internal struggle. The next morning brought news that forced Maya's decision. Crawford called to report that several parties had filed formal challenges to James's will. The Italian government was claiming the painting. 3 different federal agencies were asserting rights to various artifacts, and a group representing rightful heirs was contesting the entire bequest. Maya, Crawford explained, even if you wanted to walk away now, these parties are going to court anyway. Your choices are to participate actively in defending your claim or to let others decide your fate without your input. Maya realized that James Mitchell's test hadn't ended with finding his treasures. It was continuing with every decision she made about what to do with them. Walking away might seem like the safe choice, but it would also mean abandoning the responsibility he'd entrusted to her. Mr. Crawford, Maya said with more confidence than she felt, I want to fight for what James left me, not because I'm greedy, but because I think he knew what he was doing when he designed this test. Crawford's approval was evident in his voice. Good. I'll be in your area tomorrow to begin preparation for the hearing. Maya, you should know that the community response to your situation has been largely positive. Local support could be important during the legal proceedings. Maya's understanding of community support became clearer over the next few days. People she'd never met stopped by Mrs. Henderson's house to express encouragement. Her school principal called to offer tutoring services so Maya wouldn't fall behind academically during the legal proceedings. Even Murphy's Diner, where her mother had worked, posted a sign supporting the Jenkins family. But the positive support was balanced by growing evidence of dangerous opposition. Rex's protective behavior intensified, and Maya noticed unfamiliar vehicles conducting surveillance of their movements. Crawford's security consultants reported multiple attempts by unknown parties to gather information about Maya's family and their daily routines. The most frightening incident occurred when Maya and Mrs. Henderson returned from a meeting with Crawford to find that someone had attempted to break into the elderly woman's house. Rex's aggressive response had apparently deterred the intruders, but the message was clear. Dangerous people were growing impatient with legal processes. Maya, Crawford said during their final preparation meeting, the hearing is scheduled for next week. You'll need to testify about how you found the treasures, why you believe James intended you to inherit them, and what you plan to do with them if your ownership is confirmed. Maya had been preparing for these questions, but speaking in court felt intimidating. What if I say the wrong thing? Be honest, Crawford advised. James chose his words carefully in his will. He left his treasures to someone who found them through genuine need and demonstrated pure intent. Your actions since discovering the treasures have consistently supported those criteria. Patricia had made peace with supporting Maya's claim, but her protective instincts remained strong. Mr. Crawford, what happens after the hearing? If Maya wins, are we going to spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders? Mrs. Jenkins, the legal resolution will eliminate most of the uncertainty that's attracting dangerous attention. People chase rumors and possibilities. Once ownership is legally established, the situation becomes much more predictable and manageable. The night before the hearing, Maya sat with James's letter spread before her, reading it again for strength and guidance. She thought about his test of character, about the responsibility he'd placed on her shoulders, and about the person she was becoming through this experience. Rex lay at her feet, calm but alert, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow would bring. Maya scratched his ears gratefully, thinking about how this entire adventure had begun with a simple walk in the woods to gather firewood. Now she was preparing to walk into a courtroom and fight for the right to inherit millions of dollars from a man she'd never met, but had come to deeply respect. The shy, struggling 12-year-old who had discovered those first gold coins was becoming someone braver, wiser, and more confident than Maya had ever imagined she could be. James Mitchell's test was almost complete. Tomorrow would determine whether Maya had proven herself worthy of his faith in human character and whether she was ready for the massive responsibility that came with inheriting his carefully hidden treasures. Whatever the outcome, Maya knew she had already gained something more valuable than gold or jewels, an understanding of her own strength and moral compass that would guide her for the rest of her life. The courtroom felt massive and intimidating, with high ceilings and dark wood paneling that made Maya feel smaller than her 12 years. She sat between Attorney Crawford and her mother, trying to project confidence while her heart raced with nervous energy. Rex lay quietly at her feet. The judge had granted special permission for the service dog to provide emotional support. During the proceedings, Judge Margaret Thornton called the court to order with the gravitas of someone who understood the unusual nature of this case. We are here to determine the legal ownership of assets discovered by Miss Maya Jenkins, claimed through the will of James Mitchell and contested by multiple parties representing various interests. Maya looked around the courtroom at the opposing legal teams. The federal government was represented by 2 attorneys from different agencies. The Italian Cultural Ministry had sent a specialist in international art recovery. Most concerning was a group of men in expensive suits who claimed to represent rightful heirs to James's estate, though Crawford had warned Maya that their legal standing was questionable. Crawford stood to present Maya's case first. Your Honor, James Mitchell was a decorated veteran who spent 30 years in legitimate government service recovering stolen assets and historical artifacts. His will, properly executed and witnessed, leaves his legally acquired possessions to the person who finds this treasure with pure intent. Crawford gestured to Maya. Miss Jenkins discovered Mr. Mitchell's hidden assets while searching for firewood to heat her family's home. Her subsequent actions have demonstrated exactly the character and moral integrity Mr. Mitchell hoped to find in his heir. The federal attorney challenged immediately. Your Honor, several items in Miss Jenkins' discovery are connected to ongoing government investigations. The Civil War gold coins may be subject to archaeological protection laws, and various artifacts require verification of legal acquisition. Maya's nervousness spiked as she realized how many powerful interests were arrayed against her claim, but Crawford had prepared her for this complexity. Your Honor, Crawford continued, we have extensive documentation of Mr. Mitchell's legal acquisition of these items during his government service. More importantly, we have evidence of his character and intentions that validates Miss Jenkins' moral claim to his bequest. Crawford approached Maya with a small box she recognized from James's hidden safe. Inside was something she'd only discovered the night before, a Medal of Honor, the United States military's highest decoration for valor, awarded to James Mitchell in 1967 for extraordinary heroism during covert operations. This medal represents Mr. Mitchell's character and his service to his country, Crawford explained to the court. A man who earned this honor through risking his life for others is precisely the kind of person whose final wishes deserve respect and legal protection. Maya held the medal carefully, feeling its weight and the history it represented. James had never mentioned this honor in his letters, which somehow made it even more meaningful. He'd been a genuine hero who'd spent his life serving others. Judge Thornton examined the medal and its accompanying documentation before asking Maya to stand. Miss Jenkins, can you tell the court, in your own words, how you discovered Mr. Mitchell's hidden assets and what you believe he intended? Maya's voice trembled slightly as she began. Your Honor, I was just looking for firewood when Rex and I found the cabin. Everything Mr. Mitchell hid was carefully protected and documented. The way he wrapped everything, the maps he drew, the legal papers he prepared. He wanted someone to find his treasures. She looked down at Rex, who seemed to understand the importance of the moment and remained perfectly calm and attentive. But I think Mr. Mitchell's test wasn't just about finding his treasures. It was about what the finder would do with them. Some things, like the Italian painting, should go back where they belong. Other things might help my family, but we have to earn the right to keep them by proving we'll use them responsibly. The Italian representative stood to address the court. Your Honor, the painting discovered by Miss Jenkins was stolen from our country during World War II. Regardless of how Mr. Mitchell acquired it, international law requires its return to Italy. Maya surprised everyone by responding directly. Your Honor, I agree with the Italian government. That painting belongs in Italy. Mr. Mitchell's letter told me that legal ownership and moral ownership are different things, and some items should be returned even if I could legally keep them. Judge Thornton raised an eyebrow with interest. Miss Jenkins, you're voluntarily relinquishing claim to an asset worth millions of dollars. Yes, ma'am, because that's what Mr. Mitchell would want me to do. He spent his life returning stolen things to their rightful owners. I should do the same thing. Maya's response created visible reactions throughout the courtroom. The Italian representatives looked surprised but pleased. The federal attorneys exchanged glances that suggested Maya's voluntary relinquishment complicated their arguments about government seizure rights. Mrs. Henderson was called to testify about James's character and final wishes. Despite her advanced age, she spoke with clarity and conviction about her brother's integrity and his careful planning for this situation. James spent 2 years preparing his will and hiding his treasures, Mrs. Henderson testified. He believed the right person would eventually find what he'd left behind, and everything I've seen from Maya Jenkins proves his judgment was correct. The hearing's first day ended without resolution, but Judge Thornton's questions suggested she was taking Maya's moral arguments seriously alongside the legal technicalities. Maya left the courtroom exhausted, but feeling that she'd represented James Mitchell's intentions honestly. Outside the courthouse, Crawford looked optimistic. Maya, your testimony was excellent. The judge is clearly impressed by your maturity and moral reasoning. Tomorrow we'll address the specific legal challenges to individual items in the collection. Maya looked back at the courthouse building, knowing that tomorrow would bring the final determination of her inheritance claim. Rex pressed against her leg, offering comfort and support as they faced whatever decision awaited them. The second day of hearings began with an unexpected development. Crawford presented the court with a petition signed by over 300 community members supporting Maya's inheritance claim. The document had been organized by Maya's school principal and circulated throughout their rural area, gathering signatures from people Maya had never met, but who had been following her story. Judge Thornton examined the petition with obvious interest. Mr. Crawford, while community support is touching, how is it legally relevant to ownership determination? Your Honor, Mr. Mitchell's will specifies that his bequest should go to someone who demonstrates pure intent. Community character. Assessment provides evidence of Miss Jenkins' integrity and the impact her actions have had on others. Maya's 5th-grade teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was called to testify about Maya's character in school. Your Honor, Maya has consistently shown maturity beyond her years. She tutors younger students, helps families in need, and has never sought personal recognition for her kindness. When she missed school during this situation, she still completed all her assignments and worried more about her brother's education than her own circumstances. The testimony continued with neighbors, shopkeepers, and community members describing Maya's helpfulness and responsibility. Mrs. Patterson from the bus stop told the court about Maya's daily care for her younger brother. Mr. Coleman from the repair shop testified about Maya's honesty in small business interactions. Maya felt overwhelmed by the support, but also pressured by the responsibility it represented. These people believed in her character and judgment, which made the weight of James Mitchell's test feel even more significant. The opposing attorneys presented their strongest arguments on the second day. The federal representative argued that Historical artifacts belonged in government custody regardless of individual ownership claims. Your Honor, Civil War gold coins and other historical items serve the public interest better in museums than in private hands. Maya listened to these arguments with growing confidence. She'd been thinking about this exact issue since reading James's letters, and she had clear ideas about balancing private ownership with public benefit. The Italian cultural attaché made a more personal appeal. Your Honor, we appreciate Miss Jenkins' willingness to return our stolen artwork, but we question whether a 12-year-old child can handle the complexities of managing assets worth millions of dollars. When given the opportunity for final statements, Maya stood with Rex beside her, drawing strength from her dog's steady presence. Your Honor, I understand why people think I'm too young to handle this responsibility. A few weeks ago, I might have agreed with them. But James Mitchell designed his test specifically to find someone who would grow into the responsibility rather than someone who already had wealth and experience. Maya looked around the courtroom at her family, her community supporters, and the various opposing parties. If you award me ownership of James's treasures, I plan to return the Italian painting immediately and work with museums to display some historical items where people can see and learn from them. The Civil War coins and other valuable pieces might help my family, but they'll also help me create opportunities for other kids in our community who need assistance with education and basic necessities. She paused, feeling the weight of James's medal in her pocket and thinking about his letter. James Mitchell spent his life returning stolen things to their rightful owners and helping people who needed help. If I inherit his treasures, I want to continue that work. Not because I have to, but because it's the right thing to do, and because that's what he hoped whoever found his treasures would choose to do. Maya sat down, feeling that she'd represented James's intentions as clearly as possible. Whatever the judge decided, Maya knew she'd been honest about her plans and her understanding of the responsibility James had placed on her. Judge Thornton announced a recess for deliberation, and Maya's family gathered in the courthouse waiting area with their community supporters. The atmosphere was tense but hopeful, with quiet conversations and nervous energy filling the space. Rex remained calm throughout the waiting period, occasionally accepting gentle pets from supporters but keeping his primary attention focused on Maya. His steady presence reminded Maya that she'd gained something valuable through this experience, regardless of the legal outcome. After 2 hours, court reconvened for Judge Thornton's decision. This case presents unusual circumstances requiring consideration of legal precedent, international law, government interests, and moral philosophy, the judge began. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, I find that James Mitchell's will is legally valid and that Miss Maya Jenkins has demonstrated the character and intent Mr. Mitchell specified in his bequest requirements. Maya felt her heart racing as the judge continued. However, this award comes with conditions consistent with Miss Jenkins' own stated intentions. The Italian artwork must be returned within 60 days. Historical artifacts of significant archaeological value must be made available for scholarly study and potential museum display. The remaining assets are awarded to Miss Jenkins with the understanding that she has committed to using them responsibly for family needs and community benefit. The courtroom erupted in quiet celebration from Maya's supporters, while the opposing attorneys gathered their papers with expressions of resignation. Maya stood slowly, still processing the reality that she had won James Mitchell's test. She was now the legal owner of treasures worth millions of dollars. But more importantly, she had proven herself worthy of a dying man's faith in human character. Rex pressed against her leg, tail wagging with restrained enthusiasm, as if understanding that they had successfully completed the most challenging adventure of their lives. Judge Thornton addressed Maya directly. Miss Jenkins, you have inherited not just wealth, but responsibility. I trust you will continue to demonstrate the wisdom and integrity that brought you to this moment." Maya nodded solemnly. "Yes, Your Honor. I'll do my best to make James Mitchell proud." As they left the courthouse, Maya felt the weight of victory mixed with the magnitude of what lay ahead. The treasure hunt was over, but the real adventure of managing her inheritance and living up to James's expectations was just beginning. Maya's journal entry from 6 months after the court hearing reflected on changes that went far beyond financial circumstances. "James Mitchell's test taught me that finding treasure and earning treasure are completely different things. I found his gold coins by accident, but I earned the right to keep them by learning what responsibility really means. The hardest part wasn't convincing the judge I deserved the inheritance. It was convincing myself I was ready for everything that came with it." Their new home sat on 5 acres adjacent to Mrs. Henderson's property, close enough for daily visits, but large enough for privacy and security. It wasn't a mansion. Maya had specifically chosen something modest that met their family's needs without creating distance from their community. Rex had his own fenced yard where he could run safely, though he rarely strayed far from Maya's side. Patricia had been able to quit 2 of her 3 jobs, keeping only her position at Murphy's Diner because she genuinely enjoyed the work and the social connection it provided. The relief on her mother's face when financial stress disappeared had been worth more to Maya than any treasure James could have hidden. Marcus was thriving with access to educational resources that had been impossible before. Piano lessons, advanced math tutoring, and a college savings account that guaranteed opportunities regardless of his future interests. But Maya was proudest that her brother's character remained unchanged despite their improved circumstances. "Maya," Marcus had told her recently, "I'm glad we have more money now, but I'm more glad that people still like us for who we are, not for what we have." The community fund Maya had established was providing assistance to 12 families, covering everything from medical bills to home repairs to educational expenses for children who showed academic promise. Maya reviewed applications personally, looking for the same qualities James had identified in his test: genuine need and evidence of character. Mrs. Henderson had become the grandmother Maya had never known, helping her understand the complexities of managing wealth responsibly. The elderly woman's wisdom about James's character and intentions provided guidance when Maya faced difficult decisions about how to use her inheritance. "Child," Mrs. Henderson had told her during one of their regular conversations, "James would be amazed by how you've grown into this responsibility. He hoped to find someone with potential, but you've exceeded even his optimistic expectations." Maya's relationship with Rex had deepened through their shared adventure. The dog seemed to understand that he'd played a crucial role in discovering James's treasures, and his protective instincts had evolved into a mature confidence that made Maya feel safe in situations that might otherwise be intimidating. Rex now enjoyed premium food, regular veterinary care, and a comfortable bed in Maya's room, but his loyalty and affection remained unchanged. He still walked Maya to the school bus each morning and met her each afternoon, still alerted her to visitors or unusual sounds, and still provided comfort during moments of uncertainty. The Italian painting had been returned to Florence with ceremony that made international news. Maya had been invited to attend the restoration unveiling, where she met the museum director, who explained how the painting's recovery had helped solve other art theft cases from World War II. "Miss Jenkins," the director had said, "your decision to return this painting voluntarily demonstrates that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in human character, rather than monetary value." Several of James's Civil War artifacts were now on permanent display at the Regional Historical Society, with plaques explaining their discovery and Maya's decision to share them with the public. School groups regularly visited the exhibit, and Maya occasionally spoke to students about the experience of finding and managing unexpected treasures. But the most significant changes were internal ones that Maya recorded in her journal with increasing insight. I understand now that James wasn't just testing whether I could find his treasures or handle the legal complications. He was testing whether I could grow into someone worthy of his trust. Every decision I made, from returning the painting to sharing artifacts with museums to helping other families, was part of proving I understood the difference between owning wealth and being owned by it. The anniversary of her first visit to James's cabin found Maya and Rex walking the same forest paths where their adventure had begun. The cabin itself was now maintained as a historical site, with interpretive signs explaining James Mitchell's government service and the unique nature of his bequest. Maya had funded the preservation project, ensuring that future visitors could learn about James's philosophy of using wealth to help others rather than simply accumulating possessions. As they walked, Maya noticed a young boy from town searching the forest floor with obvious purpose. She approached carefully, Rex staying close but non-threatening. "What are you looking for?" Maya asked gently. The boy, who couldn't have been more than 10, looked up with embarrassment. "Firewood for my grandmother. Her heating bill got too high, and I thought maybe I could find enough wood to help keep her warm." Maya felt a profound moment of recognition. 6 months ago, she had been in exactly this situation, searching desperately for resources to help her family survive another day. "I know where there's good firewood," Maya said, leading the boy toward an area where she'd arranged for seasoned hardwood to be left for anyone who needed it. "And I know someone who might be able to help your grandmother with her heating bills too." As she helped the boy load his arms with quality firewood, Maya realized that James Mitchell's true treasure had never been the gold coins or valuable artifacts. The real treasure was the understanding that wealth meant nothing unless it was used to help others, and that character was measured not by what you could take, but by what you chose to give. Walking home with Rex, Maya felt the deep satisfaction of someone who had not only found a treasure, but had proven worthy of it. James's test was complete, but the lessons it taught would guide Maya for the rest of her life. That evening, Maya wrote in her journal, "James Mitchell left his treasures for someone who would understand that the greatest wealth comes from helping others. I think I finally understand what he meant, and I hope I've made him proud." Outside her window, the Appalachian Mountains stood silhouetted against the sunset, holding their secrets and their stories, waiting for the next person who might be worthy of discovering them. Maya smiled, knowing that James's legacy would continue through her choices and through the example she set for others who faced their own tests of character. Rex settled beside her chair, content and peaceful, a reminder that the best companions are those who share your adventures and help you become the person you're meant to be.